Tension in our personal relationships are at an all-time high. Dialogue, when it happens at all, is heated. It isn't that we've lost hope in what faith and politics can accomplish in our world. It's that in our polarizing times, faith and politics seem to be leading more to rage than actual change. It's discouraging, disheartening, and disappointing. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Civility is not a pipe dream. Nuance is not unrecoverable. Peace is possible. And it can all start right here, right now, with us. Let's close the space between us.
Very good. That makes everything official.
Yeah.
We really know we're filming when we do that. Kathy, I'd like to tell you about Patricia Duffy. She has this really unique characteristic of being a synesthete.
What is that? I don't think I can even pronounce that.
I'm not sure if I can pronounce it right either, but I'm trying. A synesthete is someone who involuntarily links sensory perceptions with one another. So in Patricia's case, she attaches color to things that wouldn't normally have color associated with them. So for example, she might associate turquoise whenever she sees the word Thursday. It's a pretty unique way to see the world, isn't it?
Yeah, that is unique to see things in color. I think I do something similar to that, except I translate everything into song.
Oh, there we go, like song lyrics and songs, yes. It doesn't surprise me.
No.
In a very poignant essay that was posted on a synesthesia website, Duffy wrote, "In life, so much depends on the question, do you see what I see?" That most basic of queries binds human beings socially. Having one's perceptions go uncorroborated can make one feel peculiarly alone in the world. Marooned on my own private island of pale yellow peas, turquoise Thursdays, and wine-colored V's.
Yeah, that is a great question. Do you see what I see? Of course, in my head, it comes out, do you see what I see?
Of course it does.
You know, it goes much deeper than sight, really. I mean, we could ask that question of everyone we encounter when we're trying to gauge their beliefs or opinions on everything from what kind of food they like to even more controversial issues like gun reform or immigration.
Do you see what I see becomes a much deeper question than... At the end of December, my family visited the Clark Art Institute in Massachusetts. I highly recommend it. And one of the paintings that captivated me on that trip to the Art Institute was this Remington painting that we put on the screen. It's entitled Friends or Foe, or it's also been called The Scout. And I'm curious, Kathy, as you look at that painting, what do you see?
Well, the first thing I notice is that it must be cold. I mean, you can see that in the condensation of the horse's breath. And I almost can feel the crisp night air and hear the crunch of the frozen snow under the horse's hooves. And there appears to be a slight breeze blowing, too, because you see it in the horse's tail and mane.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, the rider doesn't have very many layers of clothing on, so I'm sure he must be freezing. He looks stiff sitting there, gazing into the distance at what looks like a tranquil village down there in the valley. I think he's contemplating his next move.
Those are really good observations, Kathy. I'm pretty impressed. I think of how I see this painting, and I'm somewhat influenced by having seen it in person. So like being able to see the brush strokes on the canvas and all that sort of thing. And when I looked at that image, I was drawn to what you mentioned last, actually. It's the village or the settlement that's kind of hazy in the distance there. And I'm glad you noticed that too. The writer sort of dominates the painting, right? And I think that's the main thing that we notice, the tension in the writer's posture, the breath coming out of the horse's mouth that shows us it's cold. And immediately I was like, oh, I wish I was there because I love cold weather and snow. I also noticed that there's a gun across the saddle.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
The horse at the ready, so any threat that might appear, the scout can deal with it. And you noticed you're sort of contemplating the next move as the feel of the painting. And to me, there's a sense of anticipation that this painting brings about. And it's kind of fun to just look at a piece of art and to talk about it and share our observations. And I feel like as we do that, Kathy, it sort of draws us together to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark. When you're looking at a piece of art, it's easy to just subjectively answer questions about it. Do you see what I see? You have your perspective, I have mine. Some are similar, some are different. And we can share them and talk about them rationally and without judgment of one another.
We can.
My name is Kathy Dobie, and I'm a partner at Sycamore Creek Church and a member of the Vision team. I also volunteer on the worship and teaching teams.
And my name is Mark. I'm the pastor of the Sycamore Creek Church Potterville campus. And I'm really excited, Kathy,
Yeah.
that you and I are having this
Me too.
conversation today. This is a lot of fun.
It is.
We're going to explore together today, how can we begin to ask that question? Do you see what I see of each other in much more larger, complicated areas of life like politics and religion? But first, let's pause for a discussion question. We're going to do this a couple times today throughout the message for a question about noticing things with other people. So here's our question for discussion. When was a time where you were able to appreciate art or music with someone else by reflecting on what you see or what you hear? Let's take a moment and talk about that. There we go. Yep, we're all synced.
You know, we live in a deeply fragmented and divided time.
We do.
We often take things that are important to us and idolize them above all else. You know, our religion, our denomination, our theology, our beliefs. And we do this too in the political climate of an election year. We do this too with our politics, you know, our party, our candidates. We hold on to these things so tightly that we can justify all kinds of bad behavior just to elevate who we support, what we support, our way of thinking, believing, how we vote.
We do. We totally do that, Kathy. And the cost of that division and fragmentation in our country is really great. The collective house, so to speak, that we all live in, you know, our shared experience, our shared space, our shared culture, well, it's growing weaker. You know, the foundation is deteriorating, so to speak. The roof is collapsing in on itself. You know, we're so good at promoting our own, whatever that is, that we've compromised the integrity, the goodness, and the strength of the whole.
Yeah, and as a result, we've weakened the whole of our country. We've weakened the whole of our faith. We've weakened the whole of the humanity that we are a part of.
So in this series, The Space Between Us, which we're wrapping up today, we've been talking about what we can do to save this collective house that we're in. And this series is based on a book by Sarah Bauer Anderson. And in this series, throughout this series, we've been working to save the house.
You know, it's important that we talk about it.
It is.
Because connection is important. Community is important. And in the midst of a divisive election year, we're going to have to work together. And we are going to work together to pursue connections. Keeping connection in mind, we're not asking, how do I get others to change their mind and see as I do and come around to my way of thinking, be on my side and like me?
No, not at all.
No. In this series, we're asking the question, how can we begin to close the space between us?
Oh, through that question about closing the space between us, we're exploring in this series how to appreciate and understand each other's differences. We're learning how to practice compassion for one another. And hopefully in this process, right, Kathy, we're moving toward Jesus and toward the followers of Jesus that God would have us be. And so today we're going to close the space between us by moving from expectation to wonder. We'll start with expectation and hopefully we'll see, and I don't mean that literally, but we'll see how we can move to wonder.
Wonder, who wrote the book of love?
I knew that was coming.
You saw that one coming. I can tell you about the book of love. You know, in the Bible, the most common method Jesus used in teaching was through telling stories called parables. And it's true, these parables are stories, but they're more than that. There was a purpose and a power in their telling by Jesus. A parable would start out one way, you know, the way the listener might expect.
Expectation.
Yeah.
There it is.
And then the parable would connect with the listener. They would relate in some way to the story. You know, the story starts with characters that you might know, and you might even be yourself. And then they took place in scenes that the people of that day would be familiar with, you know, using everyday objects that they knew about.
So we can think about some of the starts of Jesus' parables. Like there was a vineyard owner who was looking to hire some workers.
Yeah.
We've got an image in our head. Or another parable starts, a man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. Right. We got something in our head. There was a shepherd who was responsible for 100 sheep.
I love that one.
A man had a fertile farm that produced many crops.
Yeah. Those are great story openers. And right away, people would have connected to Jesus and to the story.
They would have.
Because these are all people and places and situations that the audience would know. They'd recognize them. Even today, You have a picture in your mind of these situations because the parables that Jesus told are universal stories. They transcend time and space. And what made these parables so powerful is the unexpected turn that they took in what seemed like a predictable and unexpected story.
So if we take a look at some of these parables again that I just mentioned, there was a vineyard owner who was looking to hire some workers.
Yeah.
And the vineyard workers are paid the same, all the same amount, regardless of the varying amounts of time they worked in the fields.
Wow, that's unexpected.
It's totally unexpected. Or in another parable, a man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. And the man extended invitations to people not dignified in status or wealth or influence to attend his banquet.
I bet the original listeners didn't see that coming.
Confident they didn't. Or, there's this other parable where there was a shepherd who was responsible for 100 sheep. And the shepherd left the 99 sheep to the mercy of the elements, whatever might come their way, in order to go after the one sheep that had wandered away.
Left the 99. You don't expect that twist.
You wouldn't. Or in a final parable, a man who had a fertile farm that produced many crops, that man died with a wealth of crops, but was found lacking as that man stood before God.
Now, that's not what I would have expected for the farmer.
No.
Our way of looking at things can become stagnant, really. But in Jesus' parables, in their beginning, they move over and through the deep ruts that familiarity and tradition can create in our mind.
Yeah, we start there in these parables, but then in each of these parables, there's this disturbance.
Yeah.
There's a hiccup
Right.
in the parable. And what seemed to be heading in one direction, suddenly it takes a turn, a left turn that the audience wasn't expected. And, we think about this, what might have started as a simple morality lesson with a nice one principle that you get from it. These parables left the listeners scratching their heads at the meaning. The listener was left with questions that they didn't anticipate.
Yeah, Mark, you're right. But, there is a problem in reading these ancient parables that Jesus told in first century Judea.
What's that?
Well, the problem is that after 2,000 years of reading and listening and commentating on these stories, these parables, they're no longer a surprise to us.
That's true.
For anybody who's read or studied the Bible or been in church or even kids in the Sunday school.
I'm confident our kids at Sycamore Creek, a lot of them know these.
Yeah, they know it. They know it. They become somewhat predictable to many of us. I'm sure many of those listening to us today could tell us, and probably did, how these stories would end, how these parables would turn up as we set them out. They knew how the story was going to unfold.
And the problem with that, Kathy, that familiarity, is that it no longer makes us scratch our heads. Because the parables end the way we've always heard them ending. We've come to expect where the parables are going.
Right, but it wasn't always that way. Not always. No, when these parables were first spoken to the people, they would have been shocked at how they turned out. They would have been confused. The parables would have left the people wondering.
Whoa, wonder. There we go. We made it there.
Wonder. Here's the thing about Jesus' parable. They were never meant to be neat and tidy stories that just followed a singular train of thought.
They weren't.
No. They were meant to create this sort of dissonance or disharmony. They're intended to jolt the listener out of the groove of their expectations. And when Jesus would explain a parable to his disciples, it didn't always end up and clear things up the way they thought they would. His explanations didn't always mean what the disciples thought.
You're totally right, Kathy. Many of the parables that Jesus told, well, they're simply not explained. The gospel writers don't record the explanations. We're told again and again by Jesus in the gospels that the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven is like this. And then we aren't told exactly what this is or how it is like this. There's so much room in lots of Jesus parables for interpretation. And we may be a little bit like the middle schoolers who I teach in Teen Fuel, where they're constantly asking me, Pastor Mark, what's the answer?
What's the answer?
What's the answer? We want to know. And
We do.
It's tempting to treat Jesus' parables as a riddle to be solved, where there's an answer that's just right, if we can only find it.
Yeah, but what if that's not what they are at all? I mean, what if the possibilities are far more than we originally thought? What might that mean? What's the answer, Pastor Mark?
Those are great questions, Kathy. And those questions, they help us move from expectation to wonder. So let's bring this today to our own lives. You think about the stories of the people who are around us, friends, family, coworkers, all of us, every single one of us, we have a story.
Right.
And we have our own personal journey of growth, of change, of movement forward. Now imagine the storylines of the people around us looking a bit like a parable. For our own stories, I'm confident for most of us, this is not difficult to imagine it like a parable because, our stories might start out the way we expect, and then they take a detour. They go on a trajectory that we never imagined. There's stagnation at times in different directions, and sometimes move it backward in our lives. Our stories in our lives, they create questions that we didn't expect.
Yeah. Thinking of our life story as a parable, that's a thought. This is a good moment for us really to pause and ask a discussion question. We've talked about the unexpected nature of Jesus' parables leading to wonder. And we're wondering, how would you react to an unexpected event, either in life or in a story? Does it create wonder for you? Why or why not? Take a few minutes and talk about it. I'm pretty good at systems.
Way to go, Randy. So Kathy, if you're at all like me, it usually doesn't feel right at first if it's not what I anticipated or expected exactly. There's an adjustment that we all make, I think, when reality is different than our expectations.
Yeah. I think I react pretty well to the unexpected.
Yeah, you do that better than me then.
Yeah, I don't hate surprises. I'd rather be the surpriser than the surprisee.
That's definitely
But I
more
do
fun.
enjoy a good surprise. I enjoy a good plot twist in a movie, though. Not necessarily a cliffhanger that leaves you wondering what happened. But I do find an unexpected turn of events that kind of change the course of the story to be fascinating.
That makes things interesting.
Yeah. Like the iconic twist in the movie Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. You remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah, in the climactic battle when the villainous Darth Vader revealed to the movie's hero, Luke Skywalker, his true parentage when he uttered those infamous words, "No, I am your father."
I feel like you need to do this, Kathy. No, I am your father.
No, I am your father. What a wonder that must have been to all the Star Wars fans.
That absolutely was. I was fascinated by that moment as a kid.
Yeah, these kinds of unexpected shifts happen in real life too, but they're not always as enjoyable and entertaining as they are in the movies. They can be disruptive and even painful. And they require that we make adjustments to our life, to our plans.
Yeah, and the expectation, the sense of expectation, it's a problem that we all face. And when we're hearing and experiencing the stories of the people around us, the expectation is a problem that we all must address if we're going to close the space between us.
Yeah, Mark, have you ever heard of the 70 faces of the Torah?
Not really until we were preparing this message.
It's a Jewish expression that
Yeah.
it refers to the multifaceted nature of the Jewish scriptures called the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Old Testament,
Okay.
as you know. The 70 faces of the Torah describes how we approach to Scripture with different facets or angles of understanding. We all have different levels of insight and different degrees of understanding, and the 70 faces of the Torah refers to the endless possibilities found in God's Word.
Ooh. I like that.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing idea that God is so complex and so other to us that we'd be foolish or ignorant or maybe even arrogant if we were to think that there's only one way for us to grasp God and understand God. And that doesn't necessarily mean that any interpretation of things is right. There might be some parameters there.
Right.
But it does mean that there are lots of different ways that we can approach God and that we can approach Scripture.
Yeah, we have to be careful. But I think so too. The goal of life is a relationship with God, right?
It is.
Where over time, we get to know the possibilities of these 70 faces. Getting to know God is an invitation to be open to learning, and it's never about closing that book of potential learning that we haven't discovered yet.
Yeah, so the 70 faces idea for God is all about wonder. And it's a beautiful thing to consider. It's also, I think, at the same time challenging and puzzling, and it confronts us.
Yeah. Yeah, in our own spiritual and political journeys, our stories are like parables, really. They might start one way that we might expect, but they don't always go or finish the way that we would
They don't.
imagine or even like them to. There may be familiar elements to some of our story, but just as often there's unexpected jolts that just run us out of this rut of our assumptions.
They do. The thing I'm learning as I spend more and more time with people who have had different experiences, different journeys than me, who have taken different tracks in life, is that all of our lives to a certain extent are like the 70 faces of the Torah. Our lives, our very being is complex, just like the God in whose image that we're created. So, Kathy, here's a truth for you and for me today, for all of us, that our stories are not formulas. And our expectations for each other, they're not law.
Formulas.
Yeah, our stories aren't hard and fast, like 1 + 1 = 2. And our expectations of each other, they're not a law that has to be followed.
Yeah, I get it. That's true. That's true. And if we want to close the space between us, it helps to remember that there's more than one way to be right in the world.
Ooh, that's a provocative statement. There's more than one way to be right in the world. And there's also more than one way to grow.
Yeah, and there's more than one way to be made more and more in the image of God.
We live in an era right now of sound bites. We just trot out sound bites that suggest plot lines and very predictable veins of belief. We live with assumptions about other people and that we know everything about them because they fall into some category or because we place them in that category. And when we do that, the richness of the world around us, of the people around us, is lost. When we write people off for not lining up with the prescribed storyline that we adhere to.
Yeah, Mark, I don't think we realize how much we miss out on because of our expectations. Think about it. We're limiting people. We're limiting ourselves. And we're limiting God. When we have these expectations for how people should believe and act and vote.
Ooh, yeah.
It stifles the unfolding of our distinct and personal lives.
Yeah, we're missing out when we deal in formulas rather than parables. And so, Kathy, we're inviting us today to move from expectation toward lives that are characterized by surprise and wonder and amazement. And our central challenge today is to imagine how the tone of the conversation between those who we disagree with might change if we approached our dialogue with wonder instead of expectation.
Yeah, we've tried expectation. I have. I know you have.
I have too.
And we know that where that leads us.
To frustration.
Yeah, frustration and a shallow understanding of each other.
And ultimately to division and to increased space between us.
Yeah, let's make room for wonder. Let's make room for being surprised. Let's make room for awe and the plot twist of life. Let's elevate the dignity of the person before us. Allow them to have ownership of their own stories without our own ideas writing their parable for them.
Yeah, Jesus taught with these parables that make us wonder. So let's play this out. What would it look like to live out wonder?
Well, when we start with a posture of wonder in our relationships, we create space to find and name the good of the story of someone else's life. Wonder may say, my way may not be the only way. Wonder says, my understanding may not be the only understanding. Wonder says, my story may not be the only kind of story.
Wonder says some pretty wise things, Kathy. And wonder takes that understanding of ourselves and applies it to our own engagement with others, saying, tell me more about your experience. Tell me more about you. I can speak for my own, but I want to hear you speak from yours.
Yeah, wonder pulls up a chair and listens.
Wonder doesn't automatically fill in the gaps for someone else.
Wonder doesn't draw hasty conclusions.
Wonder pauses. Wonder slows down, takes the time to listen, to learn, and to engage fully.
Yeah. Expectation, on the other hand, causes us to react and to correct and to shut down.
Probably not helpful things.
No, definitely.
Wonder helps us to close the space between us. So, Kathy, this brings me back. Do you remember when we first met?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I'll never forget it, actually.
Okay.
April 26, 2016.
Wow, that's very specific.
It was at your introductory meeting with the District Committee on Ministry. That's a committee that meets with candidates who are going through the pastoral process. I served as a member on that committee for many years.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. You know, the district superintendent, Kenetha Begum Sai, who chaired the committee, told us that day about a unique opportunity being presented for a potential candidate who was being brought in unexpectedly before the committee. You'd been recommended to the candidacy program by Tom Arthur, who was a pastor of Sycamore Creek Church.
That's right.
He invited you to come and serve as a direct hire, a venue pastor at a yet-to-be-announced local church that Sycamore Creek was planning to adopt. Now, the announcement was going to be made the following week. So our committee was being asked to find a way to expedite the process for you. It was all very hush-hush and confidential. And it was exciting, too, but I knew what was going on because I had inside information.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So that yet-to-be-announced church that Sycamore Creek was adopting was my church, the Potterville United Methodist Church.
It's so interesting, Kathy, to hear your perceptions of this, because for that meeting, all I had been told going to that meeting is that I was going to meet the committee. It was like a meet and greet.
Wow.
And I had no idea that one of the people from the committee was a part of Potterville United Methodist Church.
It was a pretty intimidating committee because there were a lot of us on it. But surprise! I remember being very impressed with you. That you were a layperson at Sycamore Creek Church, like I was a layperson. You were a breast cancer researcher at MSU, and you were planning to leave your job to go into full-time pastoral ministry. You had a PhD in cell and molecular biology through the Department of Physiology at MSU, a bachelor's of science at Calvin College. I was really impressed. I might have kept a few notes about you.
I was going to say, wow, your memory is very impressive.
You know, when you were asked about your call, you told the committee that you considered 4 things when you were discerning whether or not it was God's call, and that was scripture, prayer, circumstances, and confirmation from other Christians.
I remember that.
And that you said all those things were pointing you toward this ministry. I thought you were too good to be true.
Oh, really? Too good to be true.
Someone else asked you if you had any reservations about stepping away from your science career, and I remember what you said, that you were fully prepared to do that because even though you enjoyed your work doing breast cancer research, it was helping people that you found most rewarding. And you said that through cancer research, you helped a percentage of women who would develop breast cancer, but that every person needs to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Do you remember saying that?
I do remember saying that. It's been a while, but I remember it.
After the committee unanimously voted to approve you, I went with you out into the hall to take this picture of you.
I remember that too.
And I
kind of aimed the camera up a bit.
I did.
Get me in it.
I told you how excited I was that you were coming to Potterville, and I think I might have given you a big hug, which now that I know you pretty well, probably freaked you out a little bit.
It might have a little, but it was all right. Kathy, when we first met, it would have been really easy for us to be filled with expectation, good or bad for each other, instead of wonder. Yeah. And maybe you could have put me into this box of too good to be true, whatever that might mean. And your experience is a good reminder that sometimes even positive expectations can be limiting to someone who's in front of me.
Oh, believe me, I had expectations.
Oh, you did? Okay. I know for me, I could have very easily made assumptions about the people who were in leadership in Potterville United Methodist Church. The church was struggling before the adoption, and I could have assumed that was because of you, and I'm glad I didn't do that.
I'm glad you didn't do that too, but honestly, I'm sure I did contribute to some of the struggles of the church, and we all do, despite our best efforts. And I did have pretty high expectations, but mostly I would describe that time in the life of our church as hopeful. We were hopeful. We hoped for change in the direction of our church, and we needed a plot twist. And boy, did we get a change.
Yes, we did.
That transition from Potterville United Methodist Church to Sycamore Creek Church was not always easy.
No, it hasn't always been easy.
No. Much like the transition from scientist to pastor, I'm sure.
I'm happy that that's in the rearview mirror right now.
There were a lot of adjustments to be made. And, we had hoped and prayed for the Spirit of God to move in our church and in our community. And now that I see what's happening here at Sycamore Creek every day, I stand in awe and wonder at the mighty God we serve.
I think it'd be safe to say that having a sense of wonder with each other has allowed us the time and the space to get to know one another better.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, did you know that another word for wonder is curiosity?
Oh, curious.
Yeah, that's the first of the three core values of our church.
That's a vision team member talking right there. Way to go, Kathy.
Yes.
And now I said you're on the vision team. I'm so grateful for your leadership that you provide to our whole church across all of our campuses on that church vision team. You bring valuable experiences and insight to that team, and expectations might have prevented us from getting there.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you too, and I still think you're too good to be true.
Well, thank you.
And it brings us to our final chat question too. And it's a practical question about wondering. I wonder, what is a situation or relationship where you can use wonder to help close the space between you and someone else? Take a few minutes and talk about that.
Does it seem like what we're doing is working? Yes. Yeah? Okay, cool.
I need one of these at home.
Kathy, I mentioned earlier a visit that my family made to the Clark Art Institute. And in 2022, a couple years ago, my family went to Chicago and we visited the Art Institute of Chicago.
I love Chicago.
I love the Art Institute of Chicago. We spent hours wandering around the Art Institute, and some of the paintings that I saw, they were absolutely amazing. A lot of them, I'll admit, I'm a scientist, not an artist. I didn't fully understand the painting. Like, what am I seeing? What am I looking at here? But one of my favorite paintings in the Art Institute of Chicago is just this huge, big painting called A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. It's by Georges Seurat. And I don't know, are you familiar at all with this painting?
No,
Kathy?
I'm not.
Okay. Well, it's a painting of a style called pointillism, and so it's all little dots of paint.
Okay.
And from a distance, you can't really tell that the painting is all dots of paint, but once you get up close, I mean, again, it's this huge painting. It's just breathtaking in all of its detail. It's beautiful. It's awe-inspiring to see what he has done with these dots of paint to create this picture. And in the moment when I stand in front of that painting, a Sunday afternoon painting, I'm not an art critic. I'm not a judge. I'm not an expert. I'm an admirer because I'm in awe and wonder of what is before me.
Yeah. Yeah, art was my favorite subject in school.
Oh, it was.
I can see how you just get lost in a painting like that.
You can.
And it also makes me wonder, what if we considered each person's story like a work of art? What if each person's life was a well-told parable? What if their story was a multifaceted, just like a prism?
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
When we wonder, we start to ask questions like that, and that leads to a new understanding of each other. We begin to see what the other person sees, so to speak. And well, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll all agree, but that's not the point.
Yeah. Do you see what I see? Do you see what I see?
One more time.
If we can consider these questions, we have a new understanding of God and what it means to be created in the image of God. We make space for the unexpected, and we can begin to close the space between us.
And that's the goal. Let's go do it.
Let's do it.